Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Now we can do better. Good morning. Let's try it again. Good morning.
Good morning.
But it is my privilege to be here today, and I am so excited and thankful to Embry-Riddle for the opportunity to come and present and be part of the Talon Talks. Especially since this is basically the launch of what I hope will be my second career at Embry-Riddle. Because as it was described, I was a 2003 graduate and went through the airlines and now a 737 Captain for United. So for me, it's really exciting to come back and present here today as I launch my book, 3 Feet to the Left. So the question I have for you, and I'd like for you to think about, is how many of us aim to achieve success in this room? I'm not surprised, because we're all type A individuals. A lot of us are type A individuals here at Embry-Riddle. That's why we come to college, that's why we want to do great things. The thing is, if you have to have a picture of what that looks like to you. So I want you to take a moment, and I want you to think about, when you achieve your success, what does that look like? Where are you? How does it feel? Who's with you? You have to have that type of clarity, because as any pilot knows, you need to stay 5 minutes ahead of the airplane. You need to have a plan. You need to know where you're going to be going, because if you don't know where you're going, how do you know the steps you need to take to get there? Now, I used to think there wasn't a difference between achieving success and being successful. But through the course of my first year as a major airline captain, I came to realize that there's actually a really big difference. Now for me, my journey started when I was 5 years old. Like a lot of people that come to Embry-Riddle, we got fascinated with flight. For me, it was on a US Airways jet when I was 5 years old, going to Orlando. I got up into the cockpit and saw all the switches and dials and everything, and these little plastic wings that were handed out. And to me, there was just something special about that. I remember being on that flight and pressing my head up against the glass of the window and looking down at all of the scenery and being fascinated with all of it. But it wasn't until I was a junior in high school and my family went to London to visit my sister that my dream really took shape. Because it was on that flight when, on a 747, and I knew that at the time they were allowing people to come up into the cockpit during the flight. And so I asked the flight attendant when I boarded, and said, hey, is there any chance that maybe there's any possibility you can see the cockpit during the flight? And she said, sure, I think we can work that out. And so the next morning, she came back to the back of the plane, grabbed me and said, now's the time. Led me forward, past all the rows of coach, past the rows of business class, up the spiral staircase and into the top floor of the jet. And when we got to the front, she opened the door and this giant burst of light hit me. And I was captivated. Because here we are, high above the Atlantic Ocean, in this amazing jet, and I was just spellbound. But it didn't end there. Because a short while later, when I got back to my seat, the flight attendant came back and she said, you're really lucky. And I said, oh, I know, I could never have done this on a US carrier. Just thank you very much for this opportunity. She said, no, you don't understand. I said, I've been here a long time and I haven't seen you do this. The captain's invited me back for the landing. And so back to the cockpit I go. They strap me into the jump seat, the extra jump seat in the cockpit. They put a headset on me, and I'm listening to all the air traffic control, and it just seems like a completely indecipherable language to me. I have no idea what's going on. And then we come over atop of London, and they start to point out all the sights: the Tower Bridge, Parliament, Big Ben, the tennis courts of Wimbledon. And then we make our way down to Heathrow. And there was no way, after that plane came down and met the runway, that I couldn't chart a path towards the flight deck. And so like every enthusiastic high school student, I start plotting my course. And I get all excited, and I find out about this place called Embry-Riddle. And I go to tell one of my favorite high school teachers about it, and I say, hey, I'd like to be an airline pilot. Do you think you might be able to write me a letter of recommendation? And he gets up, and walks over to me, and he says, so you're really going to do this, huh? I said, well, yeah, this is going to be awesome. He said, well, you damn well better make it, or you're going to be washing dishes the rest of your life. Not exactly the response I was expecting. But he knew things about the industry that I didn't know, because one of his family members had a fairly rocky path as an airline pilot. But I said to him, I said, well, look, I can work harder, I can do whatever I need to do. He's like, you don't understand, you can't beat the seniority list. I said, but I'll find a way, there's just got to be some way that I can do this. And reluctantly, he did write the letter, and I came here. But that moment, I had a choice to make. And maybe you faced a similar situation in your life. Because I could have either given up, or I could double down. And so I chose to double down. So I worked even harder. I had my goal. I plotted out all the steps that I needed to do along the way. And I knew that I just needed to execute with excellence along the way. And if I did that, I believed that I would be successful. It felt, though, like I was just sitting in an hourglass, and that the sand was escaping. And if I didn't go faster, farther, achieve more, that I'd be a failure. I wouldn't succeed. At least that's how it felt to me. So what I needed, I decided, was a formula. So to achieve success, I said, you need a goal. Because you can't go anywhere if you don't have that level of clarity. You need to plot a course. You need to know the requisite steps. Okay, I need to be an airline pilot. That means I need to get this many hours. That means I need to have these licenses. That means I need to have a student pilot certificate. That means I need to be here. And if I did that, then I could see the course, right? And I knew where I was going. All I needed to do then was execute with excellence. And so I did. I worked hard. I packed my Embry-Riddle course load. I took flying lessons before I even came down here. I stayed the summers. I moved anywhere I needed to move. I took the right internships, did the right jobs on campus to get those internships. All with this singular focus of becoming a major airline captain. And, because of some good fortune, it came to fruition. I got hired with American Eagle Airlines and flew for them for a couple of years. And then I was hired by Continental Airlines in 2006. And I flew 757s and 767s all over the world. Now here I am, I'm in my 20s, and I'm going to Lisbon and Madrid and Amsterdam, and I'm like, this is it, right? This is the best. But then a funny thing happened. You see, it was after, I'd say about, I don't know, a year or so, the news started to wear off. Have you experienced that before? You get somewhere and then it's the flashiness of it, the appeal of it kind of fades away a little bit. And I started to realize that, okay, well, I'm here at Continental Airlines, but now I'm sort of trapped because there's no more chase. There's nothing else I can do. The seniority list is all that matters in the airlines. You're either going to get promoted by it or you're going to be demoted by it. And when your number's up, your number's up. And so I had to find a new chase. I went to grad school, got my MBA, and thought, well, if I can't get ahead faster on my own because of being a pilot in the seniority list, then maybe I'll go to the management side. And so I got my MBA. I started to look for positions, and then we merged with United. And everything was in flux. And my mentor said, Korry, it's not the right time. You have to wait, to be patient. And my wife and I decided, well, we'll move to Chicago, partially as a little bit of an adventure, partially so that if the opportunities were to come up at the new headquarters, that I'd be there and ready to take advantage of it. But that door never opened. I'd apply, and I would apply for jobs that I thought, well, surely I'm going to get at least an interview. But they wouldn't even come up. And I'd wait, and I'd wait, and I'd wait. And then finally, on a February day in 2013, I found out that my seniority number, had finally been high enough to get captain in Chicago. And so I said, great, this is it, right? This is my moment. This is what I've been trying to do, and where I've been trying to get. And so I went to training, and I got to the airplane, and next thing I know, I'm sitting on O'Hare's runway 22 left, sitting there with the guy beside me, and they clear us for takeoff on a beautiful day. And I say, you ready? And he said, yeah. I said, okay, let's go to San Diego. And I push the power up, and we start rolling down the runway, faster and faster, the white line's going underneath the nose of the jet. V1, he calls out, rotate. I pull back on the control wheel, the nose starts to rise, and the wheels lift off the pavement. That was the moment, right? This was the moment I'd been wanting, right? This was my success. Except it wasn't. It wasn't even close. And I should have seen it coming, because it was a takeoff, not a landing. It was a departure, not an arrival. I was going, I wasn't coming. How many of you have felt that same kind of experience? You get somewhere thinking that you're where you want to be, only to realize that it's not the same. So, what I started to realize, was that I was about to go on a great journey, but it was an unexpected one. It wasn't a journey about flying, and it was that, because as anyone knows who's been in the airlines, there's a lot of responsibility when you step up to be a captain. That you have a lot of people's lives on your hands. You're managing the crew. You're responsible for this $100 million aircraft. And all of that falls on you, and it's a big step for anybody. But the funny thing was that I upgraded in Chicago. The pilots with whom I flew were a totally different batch of pilots than those that had been in Newark. These pilots had recently been recalled, most of them. I would say 70-80% at least. Had been recalled from years-long furloughs from United. And when the merger happened, they pulled them into the continental side of the airline, specifically onto the 737. So here we were, a newly merged company, and I'm a new captain. In fact, the youngest captain at the time. I was 31. And I'm flying with these people who had drastically different careers than mine. And I had the good fortune, or timing had been on my side the whole time for my career. Even while I was here at Embry-Riddle, I was able to get hired as a flight instructor. I mean, everything was just kind of clicking right along. But for these folks, many of whom had the same types of aspirations as I did, they timed the industry slightly different. And instead of dealing with the positives of the industry, they caught the downsides. Take, for instance, Clint. It was the first furloughed that I flew with. And Clint and I flew to Anchorage. And as we're sitting on the side of this creek, where there's all these fishermen fishing for salmon, almost shoulder to shoulder all the way along, we start having dinner, and I'm excited, and I told myself, I didn't want to get too deep into the furlough topic, because I know that these guys are older than me. I know that maybe there's some tension about the fact that I'm a younger guy, and that they're having to report to me in essence. But my wife had told me, she had suggested that I listen to their stories, and I really try to think about where their paths had been and try to empower them as much. So I did just that. And I couldn't help myself. I asked Clint, about his background and how he did it, how he maintained, because he seemed to be so positive, so okay with just how things were. And Clint, he starts to describe, this definitely wasn't the plan. But September 11th, nobody expected September 11th to happen. And so I didn't want to take the pay cuts, but I had no choice. I didn't want to go back to a regional airline, but I had no choice. Sometimes it would get really frustrating, and he'd find himself getting really angry about how his career had turned out. But then I would think about the Pan Am guys that I used to fly with at United. And Pan Am, I can't think of a more prestigious airline to have flown for. Pan Am seems like the one that everybody, the iconic airline, world airline. And he said those guys probably thought that they had won the lottery when they got hired with Pan Am. But lottery winnings, he said, sometimes have a way of drying up. You think about lottery winners, however many of them end up being bankrupt a few years later. He said, so I sort of figured like, those guys were along for the ride, well, so was I. And it was really impactful because he said, you're going to find that you have a choice at that point to make. And maybe you guys will find that you have the same choice to make. Either you can let those circumstances change, you can accept them for what they are, or you can let them consume you. And I never really thought about it in that way. That you could let them, you could accept them, or that they could consume you. But then I listened to a guy named Todd. And Todd had the rockiest career I have ever heard of in my airline career. And we're up there in Vancouver, Canada, on this beautiful crystal blue sky day. We're watching seaplanes taking off and land in a harbor. And Todd's telling me about his time spent as a seaplane instructor in Florida. And I was like, man, it must be cool. Someday I would love to get my seaplane rating, but just hasn't happened just yet. And Todd starts recounting his path and how he had gone through four furloughs, 5 corporate bankruptcies, and 7 different airlines. And I said, how on earth did you manage that? How do you keep going at that point? Because wouldn't you just give up? And he said, well, give up on your dream? And I started to think, like, when my high school teacher told me to give up, or potentially to give up, I didn't let him do that. I doubled down. And then here I am telling Todd that maybe I would have, if I had been in his shoes, I would have given up just so easily. But he tells me about each step along the way and how he'd worked for a couple startups. And I'd never worked for a couple startups. He told me after one furlough that he went to work for Korean Airlines. And he recounted going through Vietnamese markets and climbing Cambodian temples on his layovers. I hadn't done it. And then he tells me about flying cargo airline when that didn't work out. And how he flew cows to Kazakhstan. And I hadn't done that. So I started to think about, again, all of these elements coming together and making me really question, like, did I have it right? Was success the destination? And especially when I flew with Lee. You see, Lee was cut from a different cloth because he voluntarily took a furlough. Now, there were 2 major furloughs at United that most of these guys had experienced. One was after September 11th, and Lee did get furloughed at that. But when the second one came up years later, he had started into a relationship with another pilot, and she was going to be going overseas. She was definitely getting furloughed. And he said, Korry, I knew that if I let her go, that it was over. There was probably no chance that we were going to stay together. He said, so I asked her, well, what if I took the furlough? Now it helped, he was a military guy, he had a little bit of a pension coming in. But still, they were talking about giving up 2 full-time airline salaries, which was not an insignificant amount. And Lee said she thought I was crazy. And maybe I was. But I suggested, we got this 5th-wheel trailer, we can go tour all around the national parks of the United States West. We'll go out and we'll do it right. And steaks and wine. It'll be awesome. We'll go visit friends and family. And so she accepted. And they went out on this amazing trip, and he tells me all about it, and just the way that he described, and I started to wonder if there was ever one time when he was out there under the Utah sky, and he looked up and saw a contrail and said, I wish I was up there. And my hunch is that he probably did not. And I started to try to really reconcile these stories. How was it that some of these guys that I was flying with, and not all, I mean, in fairness, there were some that were definitely bitter about what happened to them, that they had let that whole experience consume them more than they did let it shape them. But I really struggled to reconcile, because most of these pilots were very, very positive about it. So I started to ask myself if perhaps my formula was missing something. Perhaps there was this missing piece that kind of connected that, yes, absolutely, we should be striving for success. We all want to get where we're going. We need a goal. We do need a detailed plan to get there. We need to execute with excellence each step along the way. But if you get there and that's it, then success is going to feel like a sugar high. It's going to fade away, and it's going to leave you wanting more. And then you need a bigger goal. You need to fly faster. You need to go further. It never stops. You can become vice president of a company, CEO of a company, you name it, whatever you want it to be. And one day you retire and someone else gets a promotion. And so if that's all there is, if that's all it is about getting to a place, then what's the point? If it never stops, if it never satisfies, if you're always left unfulfilled. How many times, how many of you have seen this poem, The Road Not Taken? I love this poem, right? It's because it's the choice that we all have to face. It's, do we take path A or do we take path B? And how many of you have been out there second guessing yourself? I know I have. What would have happened if I'd done this or done that? I love, like, there's a movie, Sliding Doors. Have you ever seen Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow? You gotta check it out. Because it plays this whole thing out. Literally, she misses the subway stop in London, and then it backs up, and next thing you know, she makes the subway stop. And the rest of the movie runs in parallel as to what would have happened. It's really kind of, witty. And we're all guilty of this, of looking back. We love to Monday morning quarterback ourselves. We love to say, if only I had done X, Y, or Z differently, things would have been different. But as a deacon in my church years ago told me, he said, if we look back and we look and we say, if we had it to do over again, knowing only what we knew then and nothing more, chances are we make the same choice. Because how many of you have gone out of your way to make bad decisions? Okay, we got one. We got one in the back. Most of us have not. Maybe not none. But most of us have not. We all look at we're faced with a decision. We say, what can I best do to advance my career, my life, whatever? And we try to make the best choice. But we're doing that with the information we have at the time. Later, with the benefit of hindsight, we say, oh man, it was not smart to go out that night. It was not smart to go to that party. It was not smart to do X, Y, or Z. But you can't change it. We've all had those experiences. There's no way to go back. There's only the way to go forward. And so when we think about this, and we think about these choices, maybe you're at that fork in the road right now. Maybe you're wondering, should I take that job or not? Should I sell that house? Should I not? Should I, what would happen if I make this green light or if I get stuck in a red light? And there's countless decisions that we all make, right? I'm thinking that maybe we should just follow Yogi Berra's comments that if you come to a fork in the road, just take it. Because perhaps it's that action is what matters most. Perhaps it's the moments along the way that make the journey worthwhile. And if you don't believe me, just think back to your childhood. Think back to your favorite memories. Are they focused on a place, or are they focused on people? Are they focused on events in your life? Things that made you feel a certain way? Or are they about a destination reached? And I'm not saying that destinations are bad. I'm saying destinations are necessary. But almost more so than the destination, we need to be focused on that embracing today and embracing those moments. You know, I think back to a movie that I really like, and that's Good Will Hunting. Have you ever seen Good Will Hunting? And there's a great scene towards the end. Robin Williams is sitting there and they're talking with Matt Damon, and he says to Matt Damon, "If I ask you about art, you can tell me about Michelangelo. You can tell me where he lived, when he lived, and what he was thinking when he painted X, Y, or Z." But then he looks at him and he says, "But you've never left Boston. You can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel." And I always thought that was a powerful, powerful part of that movie. Because those are the things that that have richness to our lives. That yes, we have these places we're going to go, and yes, it's good to be driven and motivated and want to do things and go forward. But if you forget the sights and the smells and the feelings and the experiences that you have along the way, what's the point? And we are at Embry-Riddle, and everybody tells you that your college years are some of the best years of your life, and they are, because there's so few responsibilities that weigh you down. And the friends that we make here, they live with us, they go on for years. And I'm suggesting that as you move forward in your career, wherever you go, and I hope you go some amazing places, I hope that most of all, you embrace that journey and you look forward to those moments and do everything you can to capture it. And in my personal opinion, the key begins with moving your perspective 3 feet to the left. Thank you.
Thank you, Korry. Do we have any questions for Korry? Just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic. A question.
When did you decide to become an author? When was that done? Well, that's a funny question. The question was, when did I decide to become an author? And there's a couple answers to that question. The first is that people had told me when I upgraded, or was getting set to upgrade, they said, keep a journal, because you won't believe the crap that happens to you. And so I did. And I couldn't believe the crap that happened to me. And so at the end of the year, and I was looking back, and I thought, I think there's a story here. And so I messed around with it. I actually had one of the slides that I think I missed here. It goes to place to this, though, that I really believe that fulfilling success comes not in spite of our life's circuitous journey, but precisely because of it. And that what is happening now is shaping and preparing us for the future. I've always enjoyed writing. My English teachers in high school probably would say differently. But writing is in my family. My mom loves to write. My grandfather, he actually has a manuscript that has never been published, and that's like a life goal of mine to get his book published. So I think it probably was in the back of my mind. But I love the power of words and how they can take people on a journey and bring you into a world that you may not know about. In this book, I tried to think extensively about the guy sitting in row 15, guy or gal, sitting in row 15, the frequent flyer, whether it was for leisure or for business, and what can I do to bring them into the cockpit? They stare at that cockpit door and they may think, well, what happens in front of there? So I wanted to bring them in, but then I also wanted to give them something that they could use in their own life. So over time and multiple drafts, then we just kind of wrapped it together, and it evolved just like any. I mean, when I think back to the fact that people read the first draft of this book, I'm frankly quite embarrassed almost that anybody would do that. But it was necessary, because if I hadn't done the first draft, I wouldn't have gotten to the second draft. And I hadn't gotten the second draft, I wouldn't have gotten the third draft, and on and on. I think there's probably been 5 or 6 that floated around. And I'm really happy with where it is now. So I never set out to do it, but I have to say, as an airline pilot, I get a lot of time in hotels, a lot of time flying on airplanes, and that works out really nicely for writing. So. All right. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate you guys coming out. And thank you again.
Thank you, Korry.